So, if you look, how do we raise the bar? Well, one way that we discussed as a group is if you look at the mandate letters, and there's mandate letters, every ministry within the provincial government now gets a mandate letter. And here's all the mandate letters from the Premier. And if you look at these, prevention of violence and community safety specifically is only mentioned in two. One being justice, one being corrections, public safety, and policing. So one of the things that might be suggested at this particular part is what gets on paper gets measured, what gets measured gets done. So one of the hopes that maybe is that possibly that the mandate letters will obviously dictate priority as we move forward. So this comes back to the entrepreneurial part. And what we're talking about in mobilization in essence is master franchise. Take your favorite franchise. It doesn't matter what it is, it's McDonald's, Tim Hortons, A&W, Walmart, whatever that franchise is. How that was in existence is somebody built the one store and then somebody came along and said, you know what, I think that'll work in my community. And when they think that'll work in my community, what they basically did is they give them the ambition and the desire to create another store. And when they created that other store, they needed the master franchise for the support. So if you think about it, take a McDonald's in Prince Albert and take a McDonald's in Singapore. McDonald's in Singapore and McDonald's in PA have the same end. They have the same cooking equipment. They prepare the food the same. Now the reality is what's different is the menu. Because obviously some of the food choices in those particular regions are going to be different. So what we're saying is if you make the anomaly a menu, you could basically create this franchise and you could have one, say, in Prince Albert, and now you could basically support it in some of the smaller areas in Saskatchewan or anywhere in Saskatchewan, or it could be in Saskatoon and other areas in Saskatchewan. So places where you have trouble getting infrastructure and can continue to support, if you had a master franchise to support that, and you put the systems collectively on the same page, then basically you can look at a smaller version because all of those services exist in all those communities. They still get services. They might be delivered in a different form, but the reality is they exist. So that's what we're suggesting in regards to community mobilization, is look at it as a franchise approach. Create the pilot, perfect the franchise, and use that franchise obviously to deliver results. Enhance community safety, obviously make communities safer, but more importantly, what we didn't know when we started looking at this, there is a huge cost savings in relation to efficiencies. Now, obviously those don't come initially. As you see in Scotland, they're just starting to sort those out now, but the reality is what they are doing is they're getting people obviously healthy and basically committed, not only to their community, but are also contributing to the future success of their country. So, how this works, everything needs to be intelligence-led and evidence-based, and what they do is they put the systems on one page and they work on their early interventions. So if you look at an offender matrix, and that's what it is, looks like in Scotland, it's got health information, social services, education information. It's obviously not shared in public. It's just within that unit. But the reality is when a person gets into the red coat, they do an early intervention as a collective team. And when they do that early intervention, they get them before they're in the system. And they get them when there's a chance to give some help and maybe get them on the right foot or during the right, going down the right path. And when they start doing this, what they did basically did is it freed up a lot of system time. And when they freed up system time, they saved money, but more importantly what they did is they got the people where change can be effective. We know early intervention works. You just have to follow some of the education curriculum, follow some of the national data, some of the national statistics. And what we're saying is if we put this kind of system within our mobilization unit, which we'll talk about in a sec, we can have that same impact. Scotland, they said, we have to change the attitude to hope and desire from frustration and helplessness because all of our frontline people are like the hamster in a wheel. They feel like they're inundated. They feel like they can't get ahead. No matter what they do, they end up in the same starting point. When they started to realize this and started to have success, that's all changed. We talked to all of those areas in Scotland. They showed us their weaknesses, they showed us their wounds, but the hope and desire was there in spades. And that hope and desire is needing to change. It's easy to become a problem identifier, but it's a heck of a lot harder to become a problem solver. Problem identifiers are very easy to find, and we all know them. And the reality is, what we're talking about here is shifting that into problem solving. So, this is an interesting back to the entrepreneurial thing. What they focused on in Scotland is everybody heard that jobs, jobs, jobs. If we create more jobs, we'll get out of our funk. We'll see a lot of different returns. And the reality is they did that. And guess what? The jobs didn't get filled. So if you look at some of our, and I was, as I said, moderated a group of entrepreneurs, and I can give you several examples where we bring in a lot of immigrant workers for entry and mid-level jobs. Now, that's not saying that that's not a good plan, because it is a very good, it's a very effective plan. But what they're saying is jobs are very important, but until we get a readiness to work based on best practices for the people that we need to get in the system and do them collectively and collectively together, then we're going to miss out on a whole opportunity to change the landscape of our future population. They did this, they studied it, they put a best practice in place, they put 3,673 clients through the program, 1,137 of them are currently in the jobs. They're out of the system. And reality is they're contributing. And now we're starting to see a real difference because all of this collectively works together. If you take one aspect of this and work on it in isolation, you do not get the results you need to. They basically told us that in spades. It's a collective, as I'll talk about later, a collective approach into dealing with the issue. This is one of the good quotes. The police originally said this, and the social services said this. We do other people's jobs poorly, but together we can do all jobs well. Again, a mind change, paradigm shift. So, common goals, best and brightest people. What they said, this isn't a place for people who you're just trying to find a job for. These are people who can think on their feet. You need to get them in there. They need to change the landscape. They need to be able to change your communities on the ground, on the fly. Best quote that I think that we decided that we heard down there is, don't let territorial leadership get in the way of non-territorial issues. Social issues have no boundaries, so why do we try to limit them? Why do we say they're a policing issue? Why do we say they're a health issue or a social services issue? When the reality is they hit us in one area or the other, and most often they hit us in all areas. Multiple people coming through all those agencies and receiving multiple responses. So, this is an interesting one, and credit Ron for this one. This is Ron's favorite one. Problems cannot be solved by the same level of thinking that created them. Albert Einstein. We left this in there because the reality is the problems weren't created by the level of thinking. But if you think of this, and I was at a road builders conference, I think it was about 3 or 4 years ago, and they had one of the largest road builders in the US speaking, and he said, you know, if I ran my business like I did 3 years ago, I wouldn't be in business. The reality is the game's changed, but yet we're still trying to apply the old solutions and trying to somehow make it fit within the system. And that is going to require a paradigm shift to get the results we need. So, what we're talking about is core. All those agencies and possibly others could be identified. Put them in the middle as you put analysts to make intelligence-led, evidence-based decisions. And those analysts, and you put the same systems in the middle. So now the systems talk to each other for the responsibility of the community in this entity. Now, obviously, there has to be MOUs signed, and had to be in Scotland. Obviously, you have to be respectful of privacy of information. You have to cover all those. But the reality is this is about the safety of the individuals. And when they got through that, Scotland put them all through the roof, in one room, and basically in one roof, they are basically making leaps and bounds very quickly. So what we say is we call that our center of responsibility or our core. And that would look at long-term solutions in our community, and what that would be is if it's a pilot, it's a master franchise, that core could provide support to certain areas that don't have it internally. For instance, parts of northern Saskatchewan, and give them the opportunity to be successful, because if they're successful, we're successful, and collectively if we're successful, we drastically change the landscape. So, in Scotland we asked 2 questions, very specific questions, do's and don'ts. And they give us these answers, and I think they're just great. Don't participate in knee-jerk reaction. In other words, if you have a rash of B&Es, don't form a B&E strategy. Because when you arrest those 5 people, there's another 11 coming in the system. And when you get that 11, there's another 22 because the input system hasn't changed. The reality is it's still producing the same results. So what they said is look long-term and stay the course. And when they start staying the course, getting a long-term strategy, and everybody committed to it, they were basically, it was the game changer. It was the thing that obviously changed the direction they went into and started getting the significant results they got. So the other thing is they said keep it simple. And this one was interesting. You write all the details down, it's going to be ready in 3 years. They all got around the table and they started this. Well, one agency wanted this, and we need to apply this, and we need this strategy, we need this, and the other one was thinking in a different way, and they need this, and they need this. And they realized after several meetings, all they did was meet. So what they said is, you know, what we need is we need a framework to work. We need to make sure that we cover out the legalities of work. We need the MOUs in place and the structure to work from. But because we have our best and brightest people in this, write policy that prohibits us to do our job, not inhibits us. In other words, put the policy in that makes sense, rather than put policy in before you get in there and realize that policy doesn't apply. So when they got this sorted out, get the initial framework is, then they start taking big strides quickly. And it only makes sense when you think about it. Any business certainly has to have the ability to adapt as they're moving forward. So, it's exciting, it's proven, it is evidence-based. It's not me sitting up here or Ken or Red Ends from Hell. This is evidence-based stuff that's proven, it makes sense, and it works. If you think about it, it all follows the World Health Model. And if you think of this and you just think of something a little different, a year and a half ago or a little bit more, we were told that H1N1 was going to cripple us. We were told that we probably could expect to have 1/3 of the workforce or less. And how would we survive? So what happened is all these agencies collectively and collaboratively got together and said, how are we going to prevent this? Think if you plugged out H1N1 and you put in violence. You think collectively you could make a difference. I think I could probably make a reasonable argument that you could. And when you look at the story and the timeline of the individual, probably you could make that quicker than you think. So, as I said, this isn't a dreamt up thing, this stuff works. Now, in the short term and the interim, because obviously we need to find some seed money from the government in relation to moving forward, what we have forward now is we've got all these agencies together every Tuesday and every Thursday. And we call this the hub. And these are what can we do in short-term solutions to provide long-term gains. This isn't the long-term stuff. This is the quick hitters. These are the things that drive us crazy as citizens that live within a city that we see that we wonder why we can't change them and they don't make sense. So we get together and just give you a little snapshot of what's happened. We formed this in the middle of January. We're almost close to 2 months in it. We've had 39 projects come up. 61 tasks have been assigned from these various projects to different agencies. Some tasks have been assigned to multiple people. 22 projects are open, but most are just waiting results. Things like SEPTED housing inspections, which take a little time. 38 of the tasks are completed. The rest are in progress, and only 2 not started as yet. Those 2 are from the last meeting. We have 44 people attended the list of attendees from various agencies, including Prince Edward Police Service, the PSC, City, Mental Health, Sask Health, CPSP, Social Services, the RCMP, Sask River, Catholic Schools, Public Health, and Addictions. They're making a difference as we speak. They're knocking off a lot of these things very quickly. Now the reality is the hub becomes the feeder into the core, because a lot of these things are long-term. They're social issues that need complex solutions. So if we can address some of the things firsthand and do some of these early interventions, that before they're in the system, but we still need to get the core, because the core, a lot of the issues that are coming to the hub, there is no quick fix. They're long-term strategies, which are exactly what we talked about in mobilization. So anyways, try to hurry as quick as I can, because I know you guys have a long day and I appreciate you coming. Certainly can take a few questions, but or I can somebody can ask me outside. I'll stick around for a couple minutes if there's any questions. So that's it, and again, thank you for your attendance.
Well done.